This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
Did you know 1 in 2 women wear the wrong foundation? Matching foundation is hard, but Il Maquillage makes it easy. Take the Power Match quiz to find a perfect match in seconds, customized to your unique skin tone, undertone, and coverage needs. With 600,000 5-star reviews, Woke Up Like This is our best-selling foundation for a reason. Available in 50 shades of weightless natural coverage. And with Try Before You Buy, you can try your full size at home for 14 days. Just pay shipping. Take the quiz at ilmaquillage.com/quiz. That's ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
Hello and welcome to the Nialler9 Podcast. It's myself, Nialler9, and Andrea Cleary here. We're doing a special episode this week. Andrea, what are we doing an episode on? Who are we doing an episode on?
He goes by many names. J. Tillman, Josh Tillman, Joshua, Father John Misty, that ironic hipster guy that all the girls seem to like. Yeah, this is not quite an Andrea's Weird Little Guys episode because I don't think he quite fits that criteria, but he's definitely of a type of musician that I like.
Yeah.
So yes,
he's
we're talking
probably
about Father John
a
Misty.
cool big guy. He seems like he's tall. He's 6'2".
Cool,
Yeah.
cool big guy. Yeah, definitely cool big guy with a beard.
Yeah. We could try and put him in a nerd box, but he's not a nerd. He's a cool guy with a nice jacket and a nice pair of boots that I could never wear. He's the guy who was suave and sophisticated and could probably put off any hat, even though he doesn't wear hats, thankfully.
That's a really good characterization of his style. He could wear any hat and has worn many hats throughout his career, dare I say. Yeah, so I guess we're going to talk about him. We will be linking this in with a little event. Look out for that later. A little cheeky event. We are coming up to autumn soon, and we did promise that we would return to the Big Romance for our Listen Closely series. So listen closely, look out closely at, I suppose, your socials and sign up to Niall's newsletter and do all those things to keep an eye on when and where and how to get tickets and so on.
Yeah, we'll be announcing the first returning Listen Closely of the autumn season. And surprise, surprise, the artist we are talking about is Father John Misty. Can we play a song to set the scene? What song can we play?
Oh, okay, sure. Do you know what? Let's play a song that I'm not going to kind of talk about. Let's play Real Love Baby. It's not on any of the albums.
Great choice.
So
great choice. So this was a song that two of my pals was their first dance at their wedding. So Gary and Megan.
It's probably the only Father John Misty song you can have.
Absolutely.
At your wedding.
Okay. All right. Let's have a listen to Father John Misty.
Tell me what's wrong with the feeling. I'm a flower, you're the bee. It's that shoulder that you need. I'm in love, I'm alive, I belong to the stars and sky. Let's forget who we are for one night. Without animals, baby, it's the people and I want real love, baby. Ooh, don't leave me waiting. I got real love, baby. Wait until you taste me. I want real love, baby. There's a world inside me, got the key. Just use it, just it for a minute. I'm free.
That's perfect. Not on any of the albums. So
Set the scene. A song he
also-
wrote initially for Lady Gaga,
really,
but kept it for himself. Yeah, can't
Straight
really
in with
imagine
the
the Gaga
trivia.
version.
no.
But Yeah, he wrote it, I think, with Mark Ronson, or there was some kind of studio session that they were in, and he wrote this song and then realized that it was actually quite personal and quite vulnerable, and he wanted to keep it for himself.
Actually, this is mine. I'm taking my ball and I'm going home.
This is mine. Yeah, I think that was a good shout. So yeah, that set the scene. I suppose musically it sets the scene. I think it sounds like a Father John Misty song.
Lyrically, that's a 2016 single, yeah.
Yes. Lyrically, I don't know how much of a scene that is setting. That is definitely maybe the most earnest we hear him, maybe, until we get to kind of later in his career. But Father John Misty is someone who is kind of like symbiotically attached to the term irony and the term hipster and the term pretentious. Like those are terms that have kind of like followed him around throughout his career. And a lot of that is to do with the kind of the cynicism in his lyrics and his ego and the kind of separation of himself from his ego through his music. This is the kind of the vibe we're talking about with Father John Misty. So I think I just kind of wanted to maybe, I feel like this episode's a long time coming. I feel like I've been threatening to do this episode since we basically started doing the podcast together.
Yeah.
All those years ago. And I've been a really, really, really big fan of him for a long time, since maybe 2015, the second album. And I think what attracts me to him and why I love him and why I kind of keep going back to him is that I have a kind of attraction to lyricists and musicians who sort of like recognize like an irony and a facade in the music business and manage to, I think, keep a distance between themselves and it, but also they're quite playful with that. And they can, make themselves a bit larger than life in order to show how kind of silly celebrity and popular culture and all of those things are when you actually try to approach it on like a human level. And I think that's the thing that attracts me to him as an artist. Some bio, I suppose, which is important. His name is Josh Tillman. He was born Joshua Tillman. He is not a priest. A lot of people think he is. My mom thought he was when I was like listening to his music. She was like, "What's that?" I was like, "Oh, it's Father John Misty." And she was like, "Is that a priest?" And I was like, "No, not really." Although, so he grew up in a kind of Pentecostal, evangelical, like very, very serious Christian environment in Maryland. He describes this time in his life as being very, very difficult. He doesn't go into kind of too much detail about his family life, but there was a long time when he was estranged from his parents from when he kind of came of age, about 18 or 19, started pursuing music. Abandoned or lost or however one you or sort of left his faith, and describes his childhood as being, he grew up speaking in tongues. His evangelical upbringing, I think, explains or accounts for like the stage name, obviously, and his presence, but also like this sort of like psychic separation of like what is established and true and what is facade and sort of performance. So he remembers seeing the preachers in his church when he was younger and wanting to be a preacher because he loved the idea of the performance. But he was also dealing with a situation in which his parents are kind of describing the world to him as being like a waiting room for the main show,
Do you know what the religion
nothing around you is real. And I think it was like kind of vaguely evangelical. He went to like, so there was the church and then his schools, but it's in the evangelical kind of umbrella. It's like proper like fundamentalist. The Bible is the literal word of God. That sort of vibe. So that really like takes a toll on a person, obviously, and it really took a toll on him. And I think that kind of separation of like reality and ego and his interest in philosophy and like theology. And he has a favorite book in the Bible. I think it's Ecclesiastes. Like, so he still has like a big hangover from his time in the church, which as Irish people, I think we can understand very well. There's no one in this country that doesn't have a Catholic hangover in one way or another. So at least culturally. So yeah, so that's also another thing that really attracts me to him, because I enjoy music and art and film and you know, even like horror that is to do with religion and specifically to do with the Bible and to do with Catholicism. And so I find a lot of that in his music as well. So that's my kind of like my overview of like who he is and what he's about. But I do have a major blind spot when it comes not to Father John Misty, but to Josh Tillman, the person, which is that he released something like 8 or 9 albums as J. Tillman. And I've never listened to any of them. I don't know anything about them. So I assigned Niall the task of basically looking into this and telling me about it, because I truly just never... I know that he looks at that time in his career and doesn't feel a lot of pride about the work that he put out. So I don't know, in a weird way, I wanted to like respect his wishes or whatever, and just didn't go near it. So you tell me about it. Yeah,
when you think about it, he released his first album when he was 23, which is called Untitled #1. And he went on to release 8 solo albums under the name J. Tillman. I think generally there's not a lot of arc in terms of the music. It's very much like folky, quite downbeat, like, you know, lyrically. It doesn't have any of the pizzazz of his later work. Certainly doesn't have any of the humor, really. It's very serious, a lot of it. But I think, you know, he was in Seattle at the time in the early 2000s. And this is the context from which he came from. And he had, by the time he was asked to join the Seattle band, who were locals, Fleet Foxes, who were quickly, you know, taken off. He was just a fan, and I think they liked him and they liked what he was doing. He probably opened for them on a show or two, and but he played as a drummer for Fleet Foxes, and you wouldn't necessarily have thought that if you listen to his work itself. It's very much like folk singer songwriter, kind of very serious. Like there are some elements of humor perhaps in some of the song titles, which he's a good man for the song titles, but like the albums are I Will Return from 2004, Long May You Run, J. Tillman 2006, Minor Works 2006, Cancer and Delirium 2007, Vasalindo Territory Blues 2009, Year in the Kingdom 2009.
Oh, he's in there. I can see him. He's in there.
Yeah. But I think some of these records were quite small releases, maybe independent stuff, limited to 150 copies. The first 3 were. So like there really aren't, you know, they're not big releases. He wasn't releasing stuff on a big label or any point. The first 3 ones and were actually limited CDR albums as well. So a very of the time. By the time he gets to Cancer and Delirium, we're talking about the 5th album. It's on a very small label still. He even talks about, can't remember which one it is. Western Vinyl is the first one that he actually, the known label in 2009, which is his 6th album where he finally actually goes a bit further in terms of releasing it. But he doesn't really, I think by the time he's singing actually 8th studio album, he doesn't release it in the UK because he said he didn't want to tour outside America at all. He was just like, I didn't put it out in the UK because I didn't want to have to go over there and tour it. I was really throwing my hands up in the air on that project. The last song on there, A Seat at the Table, is what was about. It was like, I'm done. So he was kind of going, what am I doing here? But yeah, pretty much like I read a few bits, and actually if you go through some of the Pitchfork stuff at the time, even the Fear Fun review says, ex-Fleet Foxes drummer Josh Tillman has shaken his lonesome, somber tone in favour of something more gregarious, engaging, even funny. I was on to say, even before he joined Fleet Foxes in 2008, Josh Tillman had established a sound and made virtues of austerity and quiet, pitching his songs at a slow pace that at best bristled with prickly intensity, or at worst lulled nearly into non-existence. His album suffered when the melodies and arrangements were precise and exactingly purposeful, leading Paul Thompson to decree 2009's Year in the Kingdom for its lonesome, somber tone. One Tillman, a funny, amicable dude. If you ever heard him clowning on himself at a Fleet Foxes gig, would do well to shake on occasion. So whether intentionally or not, Tillman has responded to this kind of criticism, so you can get into that. But let's play. I'm going to pick a song from one of his albums, and just to give you an idea.
This is new territory for me.
Yeah,
I'm nervous.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'll go with one of the latter ones called "Howling Light." Okay. This is what this sounds like.
Your other son in this end as he told me so. Howling into glacial light, deafening in the wait as your waking days unwind. But now the living are alive.
It's not bad, but it definitely gives you off the support guy, singer-songwriter guy, in a general term. And I think so. What happened after it? That song was from 2008-9. Sorry, Year in the Kingdom. That was from.
So I would have been 18, 19. I would have eaten that up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be honest. Yeah,
it definitely feels like. I mean, that was distributed by Sub Pop Western Vinyl. I'll go back and play one of the older stuff, maybe give you a better idea of where it started and where it's going. We will play something from actually the in terms of streaming, Minor Works from 2006 is the first one that's actually features there, and I will play a song from that called With Wolves.
Play the part of fools to keep from standing still, to keep their precious youth. The young girls pay the price for pairing off with wolves who don't know any better, don't feel like they should.
So I think generally you can say, well, it's nice enough. It sits in a mode of, it's adjacent to Fleet Foxes. It's very much of that time in terms of American songwriting and American indie songwriting. He even looks more than like a guy who's in a band, a guy who played in the band. And the cover for that Minor Works album is his face is completely covered. So he's not even visible really in terms of who he is. So what happened? How did he become Father John Misty?
So he became Father John Misty, I suppose, in 2012 with the release of the album Fear Fun, April 30th, 2012. And before this, he experienced an intense psychic experience taking psychedelic. So that's number one. He then quit Fleet Foxes, moved to Laurel Canyon in Hollywood, and abandoned the sort of what he felt as like this wandering cowboy archetype that he was playing with the J. Tillman character, and decided to write a novel. And he did, as far as we, the fans, are aware, this novel in some form does exist, but we've never heard it. But we do get on Fear Fun, the 2012 album, a song called I'm Writing a Novel, which I think points to his state of mind while this was happening. So maybe we can have a little listen to I'm Writing a Novel from Fear Fun.
First house that I saw, I wrote house up on the door and told the people who live there they had to get out, cause my reality is realer than yours and there's no time in the present. And there's a black dog on the bed. I went to the backyard to burn my only clothes, and the dog ran out and said, you can't turn nothing into nothingness with me no more. Well, I'm no doctor, but that monkey might be right. And if he is, be walking in my whole life.
So I suppose even like just starting like musically, this is a departure, right? It's much more honky tonk. You've got the keys in there. It's a lot more upbeat. It opens with the lyrics, I ran down the road, pants down to my knees, screaming, please come help me. That Canadian shaman gave a little too much to me. And I'm writing a novel because it's never been done before. And I guess immediately it's arresting because it's funny, you know, the idea that you are going to be the first person ever to write a novel. It kind of links in with the idea that you are the first person to ever have a psychic experience or some kind of revelation while you're taking mushrooms or acid. I think it was a mushroom trip he was on, but you know, that you're the first person ever who's achieved some kind of enlightenment while on mushrooms, and it's very knowing. But it was an important switch. Like just because it's a cliche that you are changed, or some people are changed when they take mushrooms, doesn't mean it's not true. And it does actually, it can actually, you know, broaden people's perspectives and minds. And a lot of people make like very, very serious life decisions after taking mushrooms. So I'm not, didn't happen to me, but I'm not decrying it or looking down upon it. But I think that knowingness of the kind of, he's already here dealing with like self-reflection and how he is appearing and the type of person he's appearing to be while dealing with his newfound, I suppose, like aspirations in what he wants to do with his life. And Fear Fun is born out of this, you know, like I said, he moved to Laurel Canyon in Hollywood, which was like in the 60s, early 70s, this place of like, it was like a real, like a hub for like the counterculture. Like basically everybody lived there. Like I looked up a list of like who exactly was living there at the time, but like, you know, Cass Elliot, Joni Mitchell, Carole King, The Byrds, Frank Zappa, like basically anyone who was associated with the counterculture at some stage in like the late 1960s were living in Laurel Canyon. And I think it's really interesting in terms of his, like this move to Laurel Canyon, I think is really interesting in terms of his career because, you know, I feel like he went there, and this is, I'm imposing a lot and I'm mind reading a lot on this, but you know, you can imagine him going there in search of this kind of like counter-revolutionary meaning and way of life. But, you know, only to find that it's 2011, 2012, the revolution's over. Everyone's dead who were involved with it. And Laurel Canyon's just a graveyard of the counterculture. And I think that's, I read a lot of kind of that perspective into the song Hollywood Forever Cemetery Sings, which is about the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which is a real site, a real place on Santa Monica Boulevard. That's an active cemetery where people are cremated and buried and that functions as a cemetery. But it is also this place where like a lot of very famous people, particularly kind of Hollywood people, have been buried, and they do these tours every day, these like guided tours, or you can do, you know, the headphone tours around the cemetery. Like think Glasnevin Cemetery, but like for the stars, you know, and not the Irish revolutionary people. So I think that there's a really interesting, like we see immediately this really interesting sort of these themes that are forever in his music, which is Hollywood, celebrity, facade, ego, America, and also death and religion and arriving at things too late and age. And I feel like that's really well done in, also the other thing is that at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, gigs are put on there and like shows and plays. It's like an active sort of like center for the arts as well. So it's this really interesting spot. Like I find it really fascinating. I was reading a lot about it today, and I was like looking up to see if anyone had written like a book about it. And I'm definitely gonna seek one out. And so I think, you know, Hollywood Forever Cemetery Sings, the song itself is a song about sleeping with a woman who gets a kick out of having sex in the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, which I think to me feels like it's, you know, it's partly sort of like shock value and, you know, having sex in a cemetery, but it's also I think about a kind of a performativity of like dark romance or love being tied up with like darkness and death, but it's holding a mirror to that. He's not presenting this as a very romantic situation to be in. He's not presenting it as cool. He's presenting it as something that he's like reflecting on in the time and being like, I don't know if anyone's enjoying this or if we're just enjoying the idea of this, you know. It's also just like one of the best sounding songs he's ever recorded. So here's Hollywood Forever, Cemetery Sings.
Jesus Christ, girl, what are people gonna think when I show up to one of several funerals I've attended for Grandpa Sweet? With you, with me, someone's gotta help me dig. Someone's gotta help me dig. Jesus Christ, girl, it hasn't been long, so it seems, since I was picking out an island and a tomb for you at the Hollywood Cemetery. You kiss on me.
We should let this dead guy sleep. I pressed the
should let
lyrics there.
this
It turns
dead
out
guy-
that changes where the song is. Didn't know that.
Oh,
News
on
to me.
Spotify.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that they have a new kind of lyrics because they've had that on the phone for a while.
Yeah, but I didn't realize if you click the line, it actually jumps to the line. So there we go.
Ah.
News to me, but yeah, that's Hollywood Forever Cemetery. The Flaming Lips played at the cemetery in a 2-night gig built Everyone You Know Someday Will Die after the line in their Do You Realize song that was in 2011.
That's great.
Gary Newman recorded a live album at the cemetery in 2013. There's a Masonic lodge there where
Is
people often
there?
play gigs.
Oh, now I
So,
definitely have to read a book about it. I'm obsessed with that. Yeah, I love that song. I mean, not only does it sound like just such a rock song, like it's the tone of those guitars are just, it's like delicious, but it's really wry and it's really clever and it's doing a lot more than, you know, your first or second listen will like give you, because at first you're just like, this is a great song. Also, Aubrey Plaza, it plays a blinder in the music video as well. That was a lot of people's like kind of first introduction to her. I remember being on the music video and people being like, who's the girl? It's like, that's Aubrey Plaza. She's in Parks and Rec. Like, okay, I'll go watch it. But yeah, I love that song. And so I think as well on Hollywood Forever, it's like, we see this is like the first instance where he's kind of talking about fame. And I think there's a real awareness on this album that Father John Misty is going to be different to Jay Tillman. I think he knows, and it's in the lyrics, that he is going to get famous. And I think he is trying to kind of reckon with that a little bit on I'm learning to love the war. I think there's a sense that the next chapter of his career will like challenge him in terms of his ego and his vices and all of the kind of the temptations that come with those things. He knows he'll get fame from it. And it's like he's telling us on that song about those kind of early anxieties. And I think that in particular, if we listen to like the first lyrics in the song, there's an interesting parallel or maybe foreshadowing of conversations we're having right now about like the environment and vinyl records. So yeah, this is I'm Learning to Love the War.
Try not to think so much about the truly staggering amount of oil that it takes to make a record. vinyl, the cellophane lining, the high gloss, the tape and the gear. Try not to become too consumed with what's a criminal volume of oil that it takes to paint a portrait. The acrylic, the varnish, aluminum tubes filled with latex, the solvents and dye. Oh, let's just call this what it is. The jealous side of mankind's death wish. When it's my time to go, gonna leave behind things that won't decompose.
I think that's really funny. I think the earnestness with which he sings like at the top of his lungs, like the tape and the gear, or like the solvents and dye. I think it's really, really funny, you know. And also, you know, that art is the gentler side of mankind's death wish, I think is like a really wry and like clever way of, I suppose, like justifying the production of art and like the mass production of art, and how, you know, I think artists are probably more likely to be people who are concerned about the environment and progressive and things like that, and they have to deal with this. And it was just really interesting listening to this over the past few days and getting to this song and being like, wow, this is a big conversation we're having right now with like Billie Eilish and Taylor Swift in particular. But
yeah, technically,
you know,
you could say, I mean, it's the second song that he is referencing Taylor Swift, although he's not really, but like could apply to Taylor Swift.
Yes, there's a Taylor Swift link here, and there's a much more overt one later that he got away with and Kanye West didn't. We'll get to that. But yeah, I love this song. I think, you know, he also said in the outro of the song, he says, "I'll just call this what it is, my vanity gone wild with my crisis. One day this will all repeat. I sure hope they make something useful out of me." So even on his like first album as Father John Misty, he's thinking about, I guess, legacy and what people are going to do with him and how people are going to mold him and shape him and where he's going to fit in things. And that's an anxiety that runs throughout his music. Like, he's extremely self-referential. He's extremely self-conscious within his lyrics. And I feel like we see that even like really, really early on Fear Fun. And Fear Fun, I guess, you know, if there's people listening to this episode as like a bit of a primer, Honeybear, which is the I Love You Honeybear, which is the album that comes next, is, I suppose, like the fan darling of Father John Misty's career. But Fear Fun is a real fan favorite as well. Like, a lot of people hold Fear Fun very, very dear. And I feel like there's been a bit of a revision in terms of his albums. And a lot of people now argue that this is his best album. And is, you know, it's kind of like the Radiohead thing of like, oh, I actually like the first album or whatever. And yeah, but it's a great album. Like, it is, if this was the only thing he put out, he still deserves to be on this. You know, it's funny and musically it's beautiful, but he does kind of grow from here. But we see the bones of what was to come.
There's a particular power and honing of craft at play on I Love You Honeybear, I think, lyrically especially.
I think so too.
And musically as well. It's a self-contained piece. So let's talk about it. It was the album that I got into Father John Misty with. It was the one that I was fully on board. I loved the way that it played with the idea of romance, but also in this fatalistic cynicism, with this fatalistic cynicism that it has in it. It's very much like, it's an album about love, but love Does it conquer all, or does it actually just ruin everything? Is it possible to be happy? Is it possible that two people can exist together? Maybe, he does explore that a lot. I think it's really interesting. So,
yeah. I mean, I think for him, or just listening to the album, it's like, can you fall in love? Does it ruin it all? But like, does love always ruin everything? I think that's a real question that's on this album. And is it worth it? And that these are the kinds of things that he weighs up. In the Pitchfork review, this got Best New Music. This is very much the fan darling, as I said, of Misty's career. Mike Powell called it by turns passionate and disillusioned, tender and angry, so cynical it's repulsive, and so open-hearted it hurts. And I think that's a really good summation of what it feels like to listen to this album. This was the album that, like you, made me a fan of his music in a really big way. I was aware of like Hollywood Forever Cemetery. I think that was maybe the only song I knew of his before. But when this came out, I don't know, it caught my attention somehow. Maybe I'd started reading Pitchfork around this time. And I think that the voice that he found on Fear Fun and through the Father John Misty ego, persona, which was obsessed with iconography and fame and death and religion, he finds love on this album and has to find a way of incorporating that into all of the other anxieties he has, how to deal with feeling completely helpless and behaving recklessly in the world in this kind of like, with this sort of like carrying this kind of like nihilism that a lot of people have post-religion, this idea that nothing matters and, well, we're all just going to die anyway, and it's cynical, and you're kind of carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, and you think everyone else is being fooled. And then you fall in love with somebody and you have to somehow square that with the worldview that you've been carrying around with you. And the person who he falls in love with and who this album is about is his wife, who he married in 2013, whose name is Emma Elizabeth Garr. She's a filmmaker, photographer, general arty type. He's still married to her now, and they are an extremely cool couple. They did one of those Pitchfork like overrated, underrated interviews with one another. I don't really know when it was. It might have been around the time of the Pure Comedy release. And they're just both so desperately cool and so desperately in love with one another. Like, it's gorgeous. A gorgeous relationship. But anyway, he finds love with Emma, and he has to figure out where his self-hatred fits into a loving relationship. And I think he reckons on this album with like, should he expect his partner to accept him as a self-loathing nihilist, or should he give in to a kind of a naive worldview for the sake of love? And I think that these are the questions that he's kind of battling with throughout this album.
Yeah, that's what makes it so compelling, I think, is like, he doesn't give in so easily, and he's questioning it. And it makes for really insightful lyrical content as well. And it's like he's plumbing the depths of his soul as well. And talking about like, his past relationships and like his past activities, and how he treated women, and how he feels imagined guilt and guilt that is there and guilt that isn't there, and selfishness and all this kind of stuff. That's just
he's somebody
really
that
human
lives like,
and really like much deeper than many albums about love are.
And I feel like it gives voice to things that people do reckon with, like the sort of like the surrendering of the self that sort of happens when you come together in a relationship. Like you're no longer just you are in a partnership, and that changes you. And if you're already someone who's maybe a little bit on shaky ground in terms of like your self-identity and your self-worth, like then bringing that into a relationship space can be very dangerous for everybody involved. It can be very toxic, but it can also be very rewarding, and it can be the thing that saves you. And I think that that's like all over this album. And these are things that we think about, and we mightn't think about them on like a conscious level, But we're always afraid of hurting people, and we're always afraid of being hurt by people. And I think that he just takes that idea and, you know, places himself, I suppose, at the center of it, because that's ultimately what he does with everything. He is a chronic overthinker and kind of blows it up. And the titular song, I Love You, Honeybear, I think, but it's the centerpiece. It's the thesis statement of the album. It is, he's telling us that in this relationship, he is not expected to change his nihilistic worldview. He is not, or he feels at this point in time that he has found somebody in whom he can explore positive aspects of life and love and togetherness, while not having to like give himself over to, you know, a kind of an overly positivist kind of worldview. It's also just one of the most beautiful love songs ever. So yeah, this is I Love You, Honeybear.
Yeah, right from the off, he's really establishing the ridiculousness and the doomed. Like, I mean, humanity is doomed, but this is a good thing that's happening. Even though
this
I'm
is
trying
the only
not to think
good thing
about
that's
that.
happening. You know, and
very
and
funny lines on it as well, though. At the same time,
it's great. Like it is really like, I remember hearing "Everything is doomed and nothing will be spared, but I love you, Honeybear" in 2015, and thinking that was the most romantic thing I'd ever heard anybody sing in a song. And to this day, I still think it is beautiful, even though I may be a bit more positive in my worldview now than I was then. But it's a really beautiful song, because I think it paints the idea of a relationship as being something where you can bring like the worst of yourself to it and still find
you're bringing the baggage. Yeah.
Like
I brought my mother's depression. You've got your father's scorn and a wayward aunt's schizophrenia, but everything is fine. Don't give in to despair, because I love you, Honeybear.
It's just, oh God, you know, it's every line in it I absolutely love. Musically, it's like lush and gorgeous, and it sounds, you know, if you had it on in the background and weren't listening to the lyrics, you'd be like, oh my goodness, what a beautiful love song. I love you, Honeybear. And then, but there's all of this like baggage, I think is the perfect word for it, actually. There's all of this baggage, you know, this is a grown up relationship where two people are bringing themselves to it. You know, this is not young love. This is not romance in the sort of like the filmic sense. This is like, I'm fucked, you're fucked. maybe we should fuck. Maybe we can be together, and we're observing and like kind of giving into the idea, or we're able to give into the idea and accept that we are powerless in the world only because we've found each other. And I think that that's, you know, I don't think that's necessarily painted in the song as being like the most positive thing in the world or the most negative thing in the world, but just our reality for a lot of people and for them in particular. And I still think it's really romantic. I still love it. So I think something about this album that I guess has revealed itself to me more over time, the more I think about masculinity and the more I think about like male singer-songwriters in particular and the kind of the space that they inhabit, I think that this album does a really, really, really great job of dealing with are we still using the term toxic masculinity? I feel like when I say it, people are going to roll their eyes and be like, oh, she's going on about toxic masculinity. But like, that is on this. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah,
do you know?
No,
it's
is.
like,
but it's,
yeah,
I mean, a lot of it, the toxic masculinity. Yeah, there is a lot of it, but he does he's reckoning with himself a lot here too.
And he's performing it like
warts and all kind of as well, you know, like, what's the song? You might be about to play it actually.
Is it Nothing Good Ever Happens at the Goddamn Thirsty Crow?
Yeah. He does use a lot of time on the album like to kind of paint the more negative aspects of who he is as well, like the ideal husband list, the things that make him a horrible shit essentially, and kind of offers them up as proof of his farcical proof of his suitability as a partner. And there's a lot of that as well. There's a lot of that kind of what's happening. So tell me, the next song you wanted to highlight was Nothing Good Ever
Happens at the Goddamn Thirsty Crow.
Can't see the whole title. Yes.
Yeah. So I think he, like part of this is maybe like if you read this album as like a love letter to Emma, it can also feel like a warning to her of like, okay, I love you and here is the worst of me. And if you can deal with the worst of me, then we're going to be fine. And I think there's 3 songs that I'll highlight in that way. First is Nothing Good Ever Happens at the Goddamn Thirsty Crow. Maybe we'll just listen to like the first verse. I'm just aware I have a lot of songs to play, so we won't listen to like too much of it, but I'll tell you more about it.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states.
Living it up, have it all, can pull more women than any 2 men or train can haul. But my baby, she does something way more impressive than the Georgia crawl. She blackens pages like a Russian romantic and gets down more often than a blow-up doll. Why the long face, blondie, I'm already taken. Sorry, I may act like a lunatic, think I'm fucking crazy or mistaken. Keep moving.
So on this song, he's singing about kind of being away, like he says about it that he was, quote, in a fucking state when he wrote the song, and is, quote, disgusted by this version of himself. I hear a very insecure, petulant imp who is objectifying the woman he claims to love, thinking of her like an object that is his. And in the second verse, so the why the long-faced blondie, I'm already taken, sorry, is, you know, there's a blonde woman, I suppose. Emma is a brunette. And there's a blonde woman coming up to him in this bar and hitting on him or whatever. And he shoots her down. And there's a line later on the road again for months at a time. It doesn't take half that long for men about town to forget what's mine. Now my genius can't drink in silence. She's got to listen to your tired ass lines. I know it's hard to believe that a good hearted woman could have a body that'd make your daddy cry. So he's singing about Emma, you know, being somewhere like, I don't know, having a drink on her own, to give it maybe, you know, writing and having a glass of red wine. You know, I cannot overemphasize how cool she is. So this is exactly what I picture her doing. And being hit on, and the sort of like the rage that comes through in this song of the idea that somebody would hit on his wife, that they don't understand her the way that he does, and they're looking at her the way that he's looking at this blonde woman who's approached him initially. And every woman in the song is objectified in one way or another. You know, the blonde woman is just being dismissed as like maybe a groupie or someone who just wants to be with him because he's a musician, and we're assuming it's Emma is being, you know, kind of overly protected in a way that also objectifies her and kind of diminishes her own sense of, you know, responsibility of herself and, you know, freedom and ability to tell men in the bar to fuck off. And so I think this is a really great, because I think when you listen to it first, like the my genius can't drink in silence, you've got to listen to your tired ass lines. I think it's listening to it as a woman, I feel like that can be an attractive prospect, that somebody would want to protect you so much because you're a genius, not because you're hot, but because you're a genius. And I think that there's something alluring, and he sort of brings you in, but then the rug gets pulled and it's like, no, this is not good behavior. This is toxic behavior. This is bad behavior. And I think that's really clever and really funny as well. Like, gets down more often than a blow up doll. It's funny. And so there's another song, The Ideal Husband, pulls from a kind of a similar place. I think this is his ego, his like masculine ego at its most destructive, showing up to his girlfriend's house at 7 a.m. after a bender, proposing to her by saying, I'm finally succumbing. Like, you finally worn me down, I'll marry you. And kind of thinking that this is a romantic thing to do, and then questioning, you know, wouldn't I make the ideal husband? And maybe if we could listen to like the last little section, because it's so frenetic and so frantic, and you can kind of feel the nervous energy that he has when he's like knocking on her door.
Now it's out.
Every woman's nightmare. Every woman's nightmare. Like, you've 20 minutes before you need to get up. Your alarm's gone off at 7:20, and here he comes knocking on the door, like, fine, I'll marry you. And he talks about this song as being a song that he like kind of struggled with, like recording, and like struggles performing as well, because it does come from like a really dark place. Like, this is, I think, actually not the most toxic he is on this album, but I think the most maybe destructive that he is on this album. And even like what the music is doing, it nearly feels like there's like the piano feels like police sirens or something. It just feels like he's just bringing in this like hurricane of madness like into this woman's peaceful domestic abode, you know? And here he is in all his glory, like, take me or leave me. I'm finally succumbing. You've worn me down. All but like, let's have a baby. And just like the craziness of that. And it's incredible. I think it's an incredible kind of portrait that he paints of something that is really, really toxic, but for the person in that moment of time feels like the most romantic gesture that they could possibly make. And it's really drawing a parallel in between big romantic gestures and actually kind of bullying a woman into loving you, you know. I think it's genius. But the last song I'll play from this album is a song that I have always struggled to listen to because I think that it is mean. I think it is a mean song. I think it is so full of hatred for the woman or the type of woman that he's singing about that I'm aware that he's in character doing this, but I feel like this is a song that toes the edge of the line the most with him. And for that reason, it's a song I have enormous amount of respect for. But I think, yeah, I'll tell you more about it after. It's called The Night Josh Tillman Came to Our Apartment, and maybe we can just listen to the first verse-ish.
Oh, I just love the kind of woman who can walk over a man. I mean, like a goddamn marching band. She says, like, literally, music is the air she breathes, and the malaprops make me wanna fucking scream. I wonder if she even knows what that word means. Well, it's literally not that. Of the few main things, one's her petty vote.
Yeah, and it just kind of gets meaner from there. Of the few main things I hate about her, one's her petty vogue ideas. Someone's been told too many times they're beyond her years. She's beyond her years. And later on, I found her naked with her best friend in the tub. We sang Silent Night in 3 parts, which was fun, till she said that she sounds just like Sarah Vaughan. I hate that soulful affectation white girls put on. Why don't you move to the Delta? I obliged later on when you begged me to choke you. It's so mean. It's like, and I find it hard to listen to, even though, like I said, I have enormous respect for what he's doing in this. And I think what brought me around to the song as like, you know, as it being his attempt to really, really nail down something that is very, very like beyond toxic that some men do, which is that he talked about how he stopped performing this song live because I couldn't find the quote anywhere, but I definitely read this or heard him say this, but he basically said that it like made him sick to see the venomous joy that a lot of men in the crowd would have when they'd sing along to this song, and clearly thinking about like some woman that they hate and not kind of get that this song is about the man who's singing, not about the woman. And I think it's a good decision maybe not to play the song for that reason, or maybe it was just something that he just felt uncomfortable seeing and seeing his art being misinterpreted in like such a severe way. But I suppose like the older I am now and with more appreciation for what he's doing with masculinity on this record, I do have a lot of love for what he did on this song. I think it's really risky. And I think he recognized that the payoff didn't kind of occur in all of his fans. Like, I do think that at this time, and he's the artist I've seen the most. You know, I think I've seen him like 6 times. I've seen him like 4 countries. I do think that there were a lot of men in particular who maybe just didn't get what this song was doing. And maybe they do now. And I hope that they do now. But it's a mean song. It's a cruel song. And it's, and I think it was, like I said, it was risky. Like, it was artistically very, very risky to put this on this album. But I'm glad he did it because I think it has its place on this album. But it doesn't mean I like it. Or like hearing it, or I feel, I mean,
to me, it's
cozy
like,
in it, you know?
I get where you're coming from there, but like, it is a character study of a particular man as well. And I think that's really interesting. And it's also like, again, it's almost salacious in its content as well. And it's like this horrible shit who's like treating women badly, but also is like taking pleasure in it.
What it makes me think of is like, in a film where there is a scene where a woman is being violently murdered, it feels like those kinds of films where that is lingered on too much, or like it is like overly salacious, or I don't know, she doesn't need to be, like, her body doesn't need to be lingered on the way. And I feel like that's the way this song makes me feel. I'm like, oh man, like, I know what you're doing, but like, you have to do it like this much. But you know, that was like an early reading I had of this song, like an early sort of projection of this song. Now I appreciate it. So please, nobody DM me and explain the song to me. I get it. And I love it. But it's, I just think it deserves a place in the podcast episode as something where I feel like he pushed the boundary almost too much for me, but not quite.
Right.
So yeah, look, we won't play these, but 2 songs on the album that I think point to the next stage in his career, which is the pure comedy album, are Bored in the USA and Holy Shit. I feel like this episode's going to be long enough, so we won't play them, but do seek them out, because I think that
we will talk more about this album when we do our Listen Closely, which is September 25th, Wednesday, September 25th. I think we'll put it on sale probably next week on Eventbrite. So stay tuned to the newsletter and Patreon and all of the various Nialler9 channels. We'll put out the news on that there. If you've signed up previously, if you've been to a previous event, you'll get an email about it. So yeah, we'll be playing I Love You Honeybear in full on Wednesday 25th of September and discussing it more. I will leave off for now, but I have a review of the album that I wrote around the time.
Do you?
Yeah, 1,000-word review I wrote. I was really into this album. So
amazing.
I might read out some of that as well on the night, but it is there.
Please do. Love that.
Still, I was reading it back and I was like, that's pretty good actually. Still pleased enough with that.
I love when that happens.
Good.
There's nothing worse than reading something old that was published by someone that you've written and you're like, good, I don't believe any of this anymore.
Pretty good. Okay, but we can leave that. But that is...
We're going to move on. Before we move on to pure comedy, I want to take a little turn into what I've called in my notes, pretentious break. So this is just to sort of remind people and maybe, reframe for people, or, remind people that Father John Misty was considered to be a pretentious prick for basically like the 2010s. And that was part of his self, right? And so, look, there's 1,000,001, and he was always right, by the way, and I never felt he was being pretentious, but there's something I came across today that I had entirely forgotten about. Was it's a news story up on Pitchfork. Father John Misty cuts festivals set short after lecture about, quote, evil. Father John Misty took to the stage yesterday at WXPN's Exponential Music Festival in Camden, New Jersey. His audience did not hear anything off I Love You Honeybear or Fear Fun. They got a speech. As XPN reports, he took to the stage and was offered a guitar but turned it down. Instead, he started talking about the numbing role entertainment plays in people's lives and how stupidity just fucking rules the world. Throughout the lecture, he repeatedly referenced a battleship that was located near the stage. One piece of contextualization is that this was printed in July 2016. So we are post-election of Donald Trump, which is something he took very badly and we'll talk about in the next album. So the speech is, I always thought that it was going to look way more sophisticated than this when evil happened, when the collective consciousness was so numb and so fucking sated and so gorged on entertainment. How entertaining should this be right now with a fucking battleship in the background and this shit on TV? How fucking fun should this be? How fucking fun can it be? Can it be real in any sense? Like, I cannot play Born in the USA for you right now. No, because guess what? I soft-shoed that shit into existence by going, no, look over here. It'll never actually be that bad because we're too smart. And while we're looking in that direction, stupidity just fucking rules the world because entertainment is stupid. Do you guys realize that? At one point, he said, it feels better to be angry than it does to be fucking devastated that shit looks the way it does. When the crowd cheered for that sentiment, he rebuked, no, don't even cheer for that. Maybe just take a moment to be really fucking profoundly sad. It's a lot less sexy of a festival look. He then performed a 10-minute improvised piece, which reportedly referenced current events, the battleships, drones, and the song's length. Then he covered Leonard Cohen's Bird on a Wire, told the crowd he loved them, and walked off stage, cutting his set short. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that this would immediately make me love you. Like, this is so funny. It's so earnest. Like, the covering Leonard Cohen's Bird on a Wire kills me. Like, why? It's so these are the kinds of stories that are being printed about Father John Misty. Okay. He also had a famously weird beef on Twitter. He was extremely active on Twitter. He was called like indie rock's most online guy or whatever. He's like the most online guy in indie rock or whatever. He had a big beef with Ryan Adams on Twitter, which look, we all know who wins there.
Could have been worse.
Yeah. And it's, yeah. So I suppose I just want to like add in this context that like not everything he was doing was beloved by everybody, right?
Yeah, he became a bit of a meme, like almost like headlines was like, I think even if you look back on some of the like the Pitchfork stuff, is like, I think there's a 2017. I read earlier on about it. I must make a note of that. I'll just get it now.
Do.
It's like, here's the incendiary Father John Misty interview you're looking for kind of thing. It's like, There was always that. There was always like people goading him to say the thing or to be the guy who would say what others wouldn't say. Here's the scandalous Father John Misty interview you've been waiting for. Okay. 2017.
And like, I don't know, if you watch his interviews, like he did a really good sit down with Zane Lowe, who I kind of like as an interviewer. I tend to like, I like that people like him, so they talk to him really well. But like,
yeah, people open up to him, certainly.
Yeah, he's done a few. I feel like Father John Misty is someone who does well long form, and doesn't. And I think a lot of like capital A artists are like this. They don't do so well in like, you know, you can't imagine him on a radio and it's like, and now here's Father John Misty to talk to us about his new song, and you've got like a 3.5 minute segment for him to explain, you know, holy shit or pure comedy to you. You know, he doesn't work in that way. I think that any interview that I have seen of him, he seems very intelligent, very polite, very forthcoming with his views. But I think maybe the fact that, you know, about 5 or 10 minutes into his interview with Zane Lowe, he like mentions Foucault. Maybe people just weren't really into that, or it's like we're just like, oh, who's this pretentious guy? So anyway, so that's I mean, it's kind of setting the scene for pure comedy, which comes out in 2015. I associate it with 2016, but I actually think it might have been 2017. Sorry. So 2017, written 2015, 2016. So Pure Comedy comes out. Definitely his most divisive album. I feel like the feverish sort of division when it comes to Father John Misty was at a kind of a boiling point at this stage. You either loved him or you hated him. The people that loved him, we were like digging our heels in. You know, he's one of the great artists of our generation. People just need to understand him more. They need to understand that he's being ironic. The other side, he's pretentious. He's, you know, his irony is, you know, concealing something, like concealing that he has no talent or whatever. So Pure Comedy comes out in the midst of this. And it for my money, I'm not going to say it's his best album, but I think it is his most Father John Misty album, for better or worse. This is the album that you hand to someone and you say, if you like this, then you're in. Like, you're definitely in for everything else he does. If you don't like it, you might get along with Fear Fun and you might get along with Honeybear. But if you like this, you get it, right? Not least, you know, the reason I love it is that it came with like I think like an 1,800 word or 2,000 word essay that was printed about it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but here's a bit of it. So earlier on in the essay, he talks about how he wants us to kind of look at this album, imagine ourselves as like an alien in space, and we're looking down on the earth and it's just a little blue ball, and we're being told the story of planet Earth, and we're being told the story of humanity as we grow and as we create religions and we start wars and we develop celebrity culture and everything that's kind of explored in the first song on the album, Pure Comedy, which we'll listen to in a minute. So he's asking us to imagine this. And then he kind of switches into current events. So he says, I know everyone doesn't feel the same about what's going on right now. What for some is clearly a garden variety, violent white nationalism, serving as a catch-all for any number of paranoia-induced anti-fantasies, foisted upon the poor and uneducated precisely by the ideologues bent on manufacturing voters who can be manipulated into voting against their own interests by making good and sure they remain poor and uneducated before cravingly blaming their problems largely on people bearing distinctions like race, gender, and sexuality, so people forget everything that's good about the American experiment, is to others an opportunity to wrench the country back from the influence of the hypocritical corporate tyrants bent on enslaving our minds with spineless liberal rhetoric in order to justify wiping out the jobs of decent people so that they can fulfill their fey utopian dream of an impossible global community designed to profit only its architects, probably banking consortiums, pedophile rings, and definitely the Illuminati. This album does not espouse either of those views. Both of those views take for granted a certain degree of sophistication, or at least a knack for cooperation that I'm absolutely convinced humans do not possess, not to mention some kind of innate logic to the proceedings here on Earth, which make a much better case for being some kind of demented joke than anything else. The terrifying reality concerning the dilemma above is everything is chaos and no one is really in control of anyone or anything. So he's obviously speaking very directly about the 2016 election, the election of Trump. And it's really weird that we are almost a decade later and seeing Trump is still the head of the Republican Party. But you know, I do think that things are changing. But anyway, this is, I suppose, his way of contextualizing the album and heading off the reading of it as being a very political album, as being a liberal album, as being an anti-Trump album, and actually telling us that, like, no, I'm not aligning myself with kind of either of these worldviews because I find liberalism to be as dangerous as all the other stuff, or if not as dangerous, then certainly worthy of concern. And yeah, I think that's a good place to maybe listen to a little bit of Pure Comedy, which is the opening track on the record and sets the scene.
Let's start at the start.
For some reason when I go to yeah. The comedy of man starts like this. Our brains are way too big for our mother's hips, And so nature, she devised this alternative. We emerge half-formed and hope whoever greets us on the other end is kind enough to fill us in. And babies, that's pretty much how it's been ever since. Now the miracle of birth leaves a few issues to address, like say that half of us are periodically iron deficient. So somebody's gotta go kill something while I look after the kids. I do it myself, but what? Are you gonna get this thing? It's milk. He says as soon as he gets back.
Already there's a lot going on there. It's kind of like this, it's like the dense lyrical stuff is going on. It's very much like, it's almost like a musical in that way, isn't it?
Oh, well done. Because this was going to be a musical. This album was going to be produced for the stage. And he cancelled it. This is why I love him. He was on a flight to go and audition some dancers. I think the sets had already been like designed and ready to go into production. People had been hired, directors, all of that stuff. He was going to audition some dancers and he was on a plane and he had a panic attack. And he was talking about it in a podcast I was listening to, and he was saying that like he was like, okay, it's fine, I'll just get off the plane. And then he was like, no, I'm in the air, I can't get off the plane. And he's like, okay, I'll have a cigarette. And he's like, no, can't do that either. So he went to the bathroom, called his manager and said, what if we just don't do this? And then they didn't do it. And I, for one, support that decision. I think it would have been amazing, obviously, but I've no idea what it would have looked like. He did say in that podcast episode that the art design and the artwork that was kind of, the early development stuff would make a good coffee table book. And I hope that someday he releases that. But yeah, it's really dense. There's a lot going on here. I think Pure Comedy, the song, is his version of the creation story. Like it opens the way that kind of Genesis opens, like at the beginning, in the beginning, God created light. In his version, in the beginning, we're cave people and our brains are too big for our mother's hips. And he goes on to talk about how we're periodically iron deficient. And I respect a songwriter who can work iron deficiency into his lyrics, because as an iron deficient girly, I feel very seen by that. But then later on, he talks about how religions are formed and how entertainment is formed and how wars start and how eventually the end of this kind of cycle is that we numb ourselves with either entertainment or religion or something so that we're not present for the horror, I suppose. And it's like, I guess it's a long enough song. It's like 6 minutes 24. There was an amazing performance of this on SNL, and it's just not on YouTube anymore. And I used to watch it like all the time, and I really wish I'd because I imagine it's unlisted, and if I had the link, I could see it, but I wish I'd save the link somewhere. But it was a really, really, really great and really powerful performance of this song. And it was one of those things where nobody in the room kind of really knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
So this is his genesis. And we're moving from, relationships and kind of himself and a kind of a human level to something a lot more macro, kind of being a bit more concerned about the world. He did not write this album about the election. It came out in 2017, so it kind of feels like he did. And a lot of the stuff that he is talking about in it feels like that 2016 moment. And we all remember how 2016 felt to be in it. Like we all knew that there was something beyond the election, just kind of there was something shifting in 2016 and things were just getting worse. The world was worse. And I think that there's a lot of that on this album. And he talks about how Father John Misty is just another word for ego, and that this is like Father John Misty, the character is his ego speaking. And I think this is where we see his ego like really try to battle with maybe the religious trauma that he had parked for a while or managed to dull or numb with love and drugs and celebrity. But that's really coming back up here. And I think, talking about this time in his career as a time when people kind of turned their back on him, I think this album unfortunately came at a time where maybe the wider popular culture wasn't really interested in listening to like an overly self-indulgent white man, trying to deconstruct his own ego and trying to opine on the state of the world, which is, I think, what a lot of people read this album to be. And it was just maybe not, it was totally the cultural moment for this album to happen, but paradoxically, the album couldn't happen in this cultural moment or couldn't be accepted in this cultural moment because there was this huge shift in who was doing what and who was saying what, and this kind of anxiety. And I think there's something lost in that. In the interview that he did with Zane Lowe, he talks about how it is a really personal album and that was kind of missed in a lot of the coverage. Zane Lowe asks him in the album, what kind of person were you when you wrote the record? And Misty says that he went monastic, he quit drinking, he quit smoking, he quit taking drugs. He says, a lot of the songs I wrote before were very one-to-one. I had this experience and this song came out of it. But this record is about how I felt my whole life. So I've been refining these ideas for a long time, this certain worldview. And he talks about how when he was growing up, he was taught that nothing you can see, this is a quote, nothing you can see or touch or feel is real. This is just a sick joke. And then we go to heaven and sing together forever. And so I think he's dealing with like the idea of our world and our experiences, our emotional experiences, the things that we love and we care for, stuff that kind of came up in I Love You, Honeybear, and also the things that upset us and anger us, like our humanity as being this kind of like religious simulation or falsity or some kind of waiting room before the main event is all over. And how, I mean, you don't even need to take magic mushrooms for that to kind of do something to your sense of self and your place in the world and humanity. And I think we really, really, really hear him struggle on this album. This is not a hopeful album. There's hope on it. It's not a hopeful album. But Total Entertainment Forever comes next. And while Pure Comedy is, I would say, humorous, I feel like Total Entertainment Forever is like, we're back. Like we're trying to look at this with some kind of like comic eye. So Total Entertainment Forever is the Taylor Swift line song, but it is also so much more than that. So here it is.
Yeah.
Betting Taylor Swift every night inside the Oculus Rift. After Mr. and the Mrs. finish dinner and the dishes. Now the future's definition is so much higher than it was last year. It's like the energies have all become real and someone's living my life for me out in the mirror.
So something else that kind of occurs on this album for the first time in his songwriting is technology. I think we heard like Blink and You'll Miss It on Pure Comedy, but it opens at the very, very beginning of a recording of him saying, sometimes when I go to the app, and then it cuts him off. So immediately there's like this idea, there's this image of him being like disconnected with, like he needs to get into this app for some reason and he doesn't know how, and that this is a new thing. And on Total Entertainment Forever, of course, betting Taylor Swift inside the Oculus Rift so that you don't have to like look at your wife after you finish doing the dishes. And the song really paints an extremely grim dystopian reality in which we're all just like plugged into our home entertainment devices and wasting away in the real world, and it's kind of no humanity left. Which I feel like at the time, like criticism of this song was that it was maybe a bit like, phones are bad, like it's because you be on that phone, or you know, it was maybe a little bit like, I don't know, maybe a bit overly cautious about the effects of entertainment and like digital entertainment on us. Looking at it now, what are we, 2014, 7 years later?
Yeah, we've had the Google VR headset.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is kind of an accessible version of what he's talking about.
I feel like we are
the Oculus Rift
dividing more the more we are online. I feel like there are more and more people who are spending the majority of their time in virtual spaces. I'm not saying that is bad for everyone. For some people, that is a necessity, and I recognize that. But we are also like, I can feel the grim future that he was kind of predicting or toying around with or painting in this song becoming more and more a reality the more time passes. And it's also a funny song, not bad for a race of demented monkeys from the cave to the city to the permanent party. Come on. You know, painting it as something that where it's like, oh, this is our, you know, finally we'll have achieved what we were put here to do when we find a way to entertain ourselves 24 hours, 7 days a week. That will be our great achievement as humans, to not have to think anymore, to outsource our thinking to someone else. And I mean, thinking about that in terms of the AI conversation and the ChatGPT conversation. And it's, you know, I feel like this song gets more and more relevant with every year that goes by. And I feel like he's looking around and he's deciding that actually we got everything wrong. And he's kind of angry on this album and he's demanding answers. And I think it, like I said, it kind of starts in the macro, like we're literally looking at the world from space and being told the sort of the genesis origin story of our species. But then I want to kind of bring us in to further into the album, to Magic Mountain, which is one of my favorite Father John Misty songs. He said about this, Magic Mountain, I wrote around the time of Fear Fun, and it's only because of Emma that it's on this album, Pure Comedy. She insisted it fit the ennui, her word, of the whole thing. It's not too terribly deep, just about turning 30 and hoping the party is going to last forever and knowing otherwise. This is where I will make the case for not listening to a fucking thing an artist says about their own lyrics, because I think this song does so much more. Like, I think he just, you know, he waves it off as it just being a song that he wrote to like around the time of Fear Fun. And it's like, I'll just put it on because it kind of thematically fits with the album. I think this is the heart and soul of this album. This is like the spiritual soul of this album. It is the album's humanity is in this song, Magic Mountain. So we'll listen to a little bit of it. I'd actually like to skip to kind of toward, it has quite a long outro, but maybe just skip to, I don't know, 3/4 of the way through the song, maybe. Sorry, Niall's the DJ. If I'm unveiling our process here. Niall has to figure out where I want.
On Magic Mountain, the wine has all been emptied, the smoke is clear. As people file back to the valley on the last night of life's party, these days the years thin till I can't remember just what it feels like to be young forever. So the longer I stay here, the longer there's no future. So I'm growing old on Magic Mountain.
So I think in this song, we move from the macro to the personal. And this is a song about a man. He denies that it has anything to do. Like there's a fan theory that it's based on the novel The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, a novel I have not read, but there's a lot of similarities between the song and the novel, but he says he never wrote the novel or never read the novel rather. But anyway, so it's a guy on a mountain, he's aging and he's reflecting on his life and reflecting on the loves he had and all the parties he had and all the fun he had. And I think that it's a really beautiful instance of a song being written before it was ready to mean everything that it could have meant. I feel like if this song was on Fear Fun, I don't know if it would have had the kind of resonance that it has on Pure Comedy, because I think that all of the sarcasm and cynicism and doom that precedes this on the album, and this is quite late on the album, I think it imbues all of that with like a human and spiritual context and contextualizes all of the doom that came before it as something that is in itself inherently human, and kind of draws it together with the idea that like we're only doing all of this stuff because we're afraid of dying. You know, we're only entertaining ourselves into oblivion because we're afraid of dying, or we're, you know, voting in the way we do and getting angry and believing in God and not believing in God and arguing about whose God is real or more real than the other person. And I think it all gets like distilled into this song, and it just really makes us like crash down to earth and be confronted with a human who is on the precipice of like the great change. And I think that's so beautiful. I think it's like one of the most beautiful things he's ever written. It's musically, like it like I said, has a really long outro. The outro is just like magic. Just instrumentally, it's so lush and melancholic and just, it's so moving. It moves me every single time I listen to it, and it just like, yeah, it really, really moves me. I love this song. And I think that without this song, this album wouldn't have been everything that it could have been. I love this album. I really love this album. I would make the case for doing this album for our Listen Closely, but I just know that there's a lot of Father John Misty fans who don't love this album. So, you know, but yeah, this is.
I think you're right. The context for the time is really important here. You know, why it wasn't as well received. It really is important, I think, to consider that.
I think so. I think it's not something we were very aware of at the time, because I think that, I don't know, I kind of have to be careful how I say this. Like, I think the decentering of particularly white male perspectives around this time sort of made this album a casualty of that. And that was a good thing that we did, in terms of like, you know, figuring out who we ought to be listening to in times of crisis. However, I do think that maybe this album was unfairly maligned as just some white dude talking about how fucked the world is and how we don't need somebody like that right now. And we don't need pretentious men. And I mean, I'm of the opinion that we always need pretentious men. I am a Matty Healy fan at the end of the day. And I will never change. But I think there's some real kind of philosophical, spiritual work happening on this album. I think it's an important album to contextualize the late 2010s as a time when we were all very, very confused and lost politically and spiritually and whatever ways in which we all kind of found ourselves, like coming out of 2016, blinking into the end of the decade, just being like, did that just happen? Like, did that, do you know? And I think when I listen to this album, I think about that time and how it, I don't know, it just feels like one of those like periods of time that is important to, you know, note it down. And I think he notes it down very, very well here, without being too like specific about things, you know. So yeah, did you like this album when it came out?
I didn't really. I wasn't into it. No, I didn't give it the time. Probably, you know, it needs time.
Yeah, that's fair. I think so.
Yeah,
I think it does. Okay, the last album I'm going to talk about proper is God's Favourite Customer, because after this, I did not involve myself as much in his albums in terms of like paying a lot of attention to the lyrics and stuff. I like them. I'll play songs from them at the very end, but this is the last album that I'll talk about kind of properly. And this album is God's Favourite Customer, which I think can probably be read fairly as, you know, maybe a bit of a response to the reception that Pure Comedy got. Pure Comedy is definitely his most out there, most experimental album. And I think he brings this back kind of down to earth. There isn't really a big central conceit in the same way that Pure Comedy had. There's no big state of the world address. He's not opining. We return here to the subject of love, and where Honeybear was kind of cynically idealistic and full of hope that like the change that he desired in kind of exercising all of this toxicity out of himself through song, that change is still possible. I think that on God's Favourite Customer, this is now about a relationship. It's not about falling in love. It's about maintaining love for a long time, where mistakes are made. And some of those mistakes are too big to fix by showing up at 7 a.m. and proposing. And I think it's also about, it raises questions about like what is left after you destroy your ego entirely. Because I think the Father John Misty project has been about trying to separate oneself from one's ego so that you can view it objectively in some way, but also the destruction of that ego. And I think this album asks questions about what is left once you do that. He said about the album, this is the real I Love You, Honeybear, without the cynicism. Most of this next album was written in a 6-week period where I was kind of on the straights. I was living in a hotel for 2 months. It's kind of about, misadventure. The words were just pouring out of me. It was really rooted in something that happened last year. That was, well, my life blew up. I think the music essentially serves the purpose of making the painful and the isolating less painful and less isolating. But in short, it's a heartache album. The lead single from the album was Mr. Tillman, which is a kind of a song that takes the form of like a back and forth narrative between Misty and a hotel concierge, while he's like very politely explaining to him that like, you trashed the room last night and we really appreciate it if you didn't do that. And it's funny. It's very melancholic and sad, and I adore this song. So yeah, this is Mr. Tillman.
Tillman, good to see you again. There's a few outstanding charges. Just before we check you in, let's see here. You left your passport in the mini fridge and a message with the says here the picture isn't or just a reminder about our policy. Don't leave your mattress in the rain. If you sleep on the balcony, okay, did you and your guests have a pleasant stay? What a beautiful tattoo that young man had on his face. And oh, will you need a driver out to fix?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm distracted.
He's kind of back in that mode.
Because I need to pause before we talk about this song because I've just, for the listener, received an email from Mr. Nialler9 that has the link.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
To the Internet Archive of the SNL of the SNL performance.
God, I did that and then I forgot to say it to you, obviously, during the song.
I'm so happy. Thank you so
when you
much
mentioned
for
it.
that. This is why we friends.
Yeah,
amazing stuff. Thank you. Yes. Sorry, you were saying about Mr. Tillman. He's very much back here. Yes.
He's back in that mode. He's back in the wry,
yeah,
silly lyricism, the funny, like that line there. What a beautiful tattoo that young man had on his face. And just the Jason Isbell's here as well. And he seemed a little worried about you. It's those like, it's like, this is like his White Lotus. Obviously, the song.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. That's so what it is. I love a reminder about our policy. Don't leave your mattress in the rain when you sleep on the balcony, which suggests that the hotel has a policy where you can sleep on the balcony on your mattress, but just don't leave it out in the rain. And it's like this hotel concierge being like so polite to him, and like maybe because he's a celebrity, or you know, maybe it's because he has a lot of money and he's paying a lot of money for this hotel room.
Well, it's the idea of the customer is always right, and you know, this is God's favorite customer. We've talked before about, there's a Beastie Boys story about them throwing TVs out the window, and the concierge guy goes up and is like so polite. He's like, let's just have a look and see, like there must be something going on that like the TVs keep falling out the window. We can maybe look at getting, you know, the window fixed if they keep falling out, you know, like what is it? That's the problem.
Oh my God.
You know, shames them in with kindness, basically.
That's me going through my daily life, just like bumping into doors and apologizing to them. Like, yeah, me as a hotel staff. But yeah, so I mean, I love this song. I think it's really melodic as well. I think it's like really dark, and there's something very sad about it and something very funny about it. I think it was a really good first song to return back with. So, you know, he talks about this sort of breakdown. He calls it a misadventure, you know, some kind of breakdown. He's living away from his family and his wife, and for a period of a couple of months. He's writing this album during this time. He's not doing well, and the album very much reflects this. But one of my favorite songs that he's ever written. So we've heard a lot about Emma on previous albums and on this album as well, but he's written a song from her perspective on this album, her perspective during the breakdown, and it's called Please Don't Die, and it's very sad and beautiful, and it sounds like it.
To my side, somebody stop this joyless joyride. I'm feeling older than my 35 years. One more cryptic message, thinking that I might end it. Oh God, you must have woken up to me saying that it's all too much. I'll take it easy with the morbid stuff. Oh, and honey, I'm worried about you. You're too much to lose.
So we can hear in the verses, he's like, oh my God, I texted you like such worrying text messages last night when I was out of it, and I don't know what I said. And then we hear her perspective in the chorus, which is, honey, I'm worried about you. You're too much to lose. You're all that I have. Please don't die wherever you are tonight. So and I think, like, you know, it's an extremely earnest song. It's one of his more earnest songs, I think. But you also get lines like, I'll take it easy with the morbid stuff, which is so his voice. Like, but what I love about this song is that, like, I think going back to Honeybear and the kinds of questions that he was asking about relationships and his sort of like anxieties, his like philosophical anxieties about like, is it okay? Is it ethical for me to enter into a relationship with this woman with all of my baggage? Here's all of it. You decide. And I think that's pretty much what happens on Honeybear, and they fall in love. And now I think we see those questions being raised again of like, you know, I told you I wasn't good. I told you that it might not have been a good idea for you to get involved with me. And it's sad, but it's also like in the way that I Love You, Honeybear was really real about dealing with the beginning of a relationship. I feel like God's Favourite Customer is really real about dealing with like the work that goes into a relationship of this kind in particular, where from the outside you might look at it and be like, oh my God, you know, this is sad, or this is worrying, but it works for them. And it's a kind of a us against the world sort of relationship. And I think he's returning to those ideas and maybe looking at them like, yeah, I told you this was going to happen, and I'm sorry. And here I am, and I'm lost, and I'm living in this hotel, and I don't know what to do. And it's so desperate. It's so like, it's really personal. And I think as well, we return as always to religion. And you know, the album's called God's Favourite Customer, which is just this, you know, perfect Father John Misty album in that it's about like kind of consumerism and the Lord, and where they meet in America. But I think that the gap that his fate left in him is still very much kind of present here as well, because not only, you know, like we've talked before about what do you do when you lose your faith? Okay, you fill that with ego. Okay, what do you do when you destroy your ego? Okay, you fill that with love or family or friends, or I hate to say it, but each other is all we've got, is a line from Pure Comedy. But then when you remove love and people and each other in some kind of like self-destructive haze, what are you left with? And I think the thing that he's left with is returning back around in that cycle to searching for God. And so I think on God's Favourite Customer, the song, which features incredible backing vocals from Wise Blood, is about this desperation of having lost everything, and like really, really everything, like yourself, your ego, your wife, your loved ones, your belief in the world, and then circling back around and thinking, well, maybe I'll give this God thing a try again. And it's a gorgeous song. So yeah, if we maybe listen from like second chorus-ish, you can really hear her vocals at their best there, but it's beautiful.
We're the man who has everything that he wants. You can spot him from a mile away in his gold chain and only one pair of socks. I'm out here testing the maxim that all good things have to stop. The bar closes at 5, but the big man is just opening shop.
It's really hard to turn these songs off, but I'm conscious we are probably close to like 2 hours now.
I know.
Really on this episode. This is the longest episode we've done in a long time.
I'm so sorry.
No,
I did
don't
not
be sorry.
expect it to be. And I've put songs out.
I just got a text about a meeting I'm supposed to be doing at 5. I'm like, yeah, if I'm finished, I'll text you then.
Sorry. No, we will be finished. We're wrapping up now. Okay.
It's only it. Yeah.
Right. So
keeps going.
God's favorite customer. Again, like I said with
I love that line on it there. Sorry, the bar closed at 5. The big man is just opening shop.
Oh, I mean, come on. Like it's so good. Sometimes, you know, it's hard to talk about music that you love in ways that isn't just, it's so good. But that line in particular that's a favorite of mine from this song as well. It's so good. And I think in the same way that like Magic Mountain was the spiritual heart of pure comedy, I think this song is the spiritual heart of God's Favorite Customer. What I think is interesting about it is that there's hope in it, and that the door is more open in his music than it's ever been to his like return to, or like acceptance of, or curiosity in religion. And this might be something that like, and I'm speaking about the person in the songs here, not about Joshua Tillman, the man, but from what I get, it's like, there's like a little crack in the windows, a little crack in the door, and he's curious enough now to peek in. He's lived this life, and he's older now, and he's wiser now, and he's read philosophy, and he's looked into theology, and he's been an atheist, and he's been a believer, and he's rejected it all. But now it's just sort of like there's a little bit of light coming through the door, and he's curious enough to walk over and look in. And that curiosity comes from a place of desperation, of having lost everything. I think that's a really interesting sort of like space to imagine yourself in. I've never had a religious experience or anything like that, but you know, I'm extremely interested in them as experiences that people have. And I just think that this song is really, it deals with faith and desperation in a really, really beautiful way that I think is kind of unique to him, in that it's also still funny. I'm going to finish this album and basically this podcast by just drawing attention to one lyric on The Palace, which we don't have to play, but it's one of my favorite Father John Misty lyrics. And it is, last night I wrote a poem. Man, I must have been in the poem zone. Which every time I listen to it, I laugh, like out loud. I laugh. Man, I must have been in the poem zone. It's good stuff. But yeah, look, I'm aware that I have not covered Chloë in the Next 20th Century. It's not because I don't like the album. It's just because basically it came out, I listened to it at the time, and I've basically never gone back to it. But I had a listen through it today and was like, oh, yeah, I should totally be listening to this. I believe I even reviewed it well at the time, maybe on a reader or something, but just never returned to it.
Sometimes when you review things like that, you kind of compartmentalize them and then don't go back.
Yeah, I think
necessarily.
So. Because it's work. But so I do like the album. I will listen to it. I will return to it. There are rumors afoot that there is an album proper that isn't the greatest hits coming later in the year.
Hits.
The great-ish hits.
I have my dreams and my dreams had to crawl.
Yeah. And the rest of the title. It's like the kind of that Fiona Apple title that's like 40 words long or whatever. But yeah, I feel like now is a really good time to check back in on Josh, having been away from him for a while and realizing that like he still has the capacity to like mean a lot to me, and I'm still finding new things in his music now that I'm older, and new ways to think about his music and to think about the world through his music. And I just think he's great. I just think he's a great musician, and we shouldn't have been so mean to him in the 2010s. We all had Twitter and we were all awful.
I mean, not much has changed, but just we've all been through a lot. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah. And yeah, I just think I'm really, really, really looking forward to the Honeybear night in the Big Romance. I'm looking forward to talking about this more. I could, as is evident by the by the runtime of this episode, I could talk about him forever. So if you'd like me to talk your ear off, come to the Big Romance and I will do that.
Yeah.
Happily. Yes.
That'll be Wednesday, the 25th of September. And we will put that on sale. It's a 40 capacity, so very limited if you haven't been to the Big Romance for any listening parties we're doing.
Yeah.
And there's more to come. But listen, that was I appreciate the enthusiasm. I appreciate your knowledge and your,
thank you.
He's such an interesting lyricist as well. And I think there's so much to explore there. And that's why we took the time. Really,
oh yeah. And I mean, there's
it
really might feel like I couldn't possibly have anything else to say about him, but there's so much. So yeah, no, but thank you for giving me this space to
just as well we didn't talk about the 8 albums he did before that.
Very pleased. Yeah, very pleased that we didn't do that.
There wasn't time.
I think Fleet Fox has got like one mention in one line. So,
yeah. I just played in their band. Whatever.
Yeah, he's just in that band, Fleet Foxes, whatever. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for listening. If you made it this far, I'm assuming you're a fan of his. So yeah. Thanks, Niall.
Well, thank you, Andrea, for sharing about your cool big guy, the man in the poem zone.
That's me. He's a cool big guy. He's not a weird little guy. He's a cool big guy.
Cool
Perfect.
Big guy. Father John Misty,
Perfect.
Josh Tillman, Jay Tillman. Yeah. Is he a father, by the way? Is he a dad? Because that'd be an I might be interested in hearing his thoughts on mortality and looking after another person other than himself.
Continuing on the horror.
With the lyrics there of not Pure Comedy, the second song you played from it.
Total Entertainment Forever?
No, it was Pure Comedy, sorry. Yeah, just like he starts talking about like minding children and you're like, and then iron deficiency and all that stuff. And I'm like, we are all iron deficient.
Yeah.
Most Irish people are iron deficient.
Why is it so painful for us to give birth? Like, who designed us this way? Oh, not as good as iron.
I've got my vitamin D anyway as well. And I did a blood test recently and I found out I'm okay with all those things. So that's good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, no,
there's
on that song
there's
you just
one really
talk
good
about,
lyric on that song, which is, so he's talking about the baby and about the man and the woman looking after the baby. And from her perspective, he says, as soon as we get back from the hunt, we can switch, in that she's at home feeding the baby. He's out hunting. It's hard not to fall in love with something so helpless. Ladies, I hope we don't end up regretting this. Like regretting that the agreement will be that he hunts and you feed the baby with your milk. And it's so clever. It's like, it's so good.
Well, that's why I thought maybe he has some lived experience of this. So
maybe I will look into that.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything on a cursory scroll of the internet, but sure. Well, that's Father John Misty. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Niall. Thank you, listeners.
Yeah. Look out for a missive from me and from us about the listening party. If you like what we're doing here, patreon.com/Nialler9. You get discounts to the Listen Closely parties and also D&D Sleaze Disco I'm doing on September 28th, my birthday. Already put that on sale yesterday. Going well for tickets, so come on down. It's going to be a fun one. Nostalgia, but make it fun. So that's the Indie Sleaze Disco. Much more. I'm going to wrap this up now because we've been on for way too long. And if you're still here, you're crazy. What are you doing here? Time for you to go off and listen to this. Go off and talk to somebody. I'm going off to talk to somebody.
Stop entertaining yourself into oblivion, sheeple. Bye.
Exactly that. Okay, bye.
will coverage make me look cakey? Is my undertone neutral or is it cool? We get it. Finding the right foundation is hard. But with Il Maquillage, it's easy to find your perfect match online, customized for your unique skin tone and coverage needs. Plus, with Try Before You Buy, you can try your full size at home for 14 days. With over 600,000 five-star reviews, this best-selling foundation is going viral for a reason. Take the Power Match quiz now at ilmaquillage.com/quiz. ILMAKIAGE.com/quiz.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
Thanks for listening to the Nialler9 Podcast. If you like what we do, why not consider supporting us at patreon.com/Nialler9.